Welcome to Crime Era, where the darkest secrets of crime are uncovered and the hidden truths of criminal underworlds come to light. In the dim hum of post-Vietnam America, the world felt unmoored. Faith was shifting, the old gods seemed tired, and new philosophies sprouted in the cracks of uncertainty. It was an age of yearning, for meaning, for transcendence, for something beyond the noise. And out of that chaos, two seekers met. Their names were Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. He, a music teacher with a soft-spoken southern voice and restless eyes that glimmered with conviction. She, a nurse, drawn to the mystical currents of astrology and New Age thought. Together, they would forge a belief system unlike any other, a vision of salvation that merged Christian prophecy, UFO mythology, and apocalyptic longing. They called it the next level. But the world would remember it as Heaven's Gate. Investigators, years later, would trace the roots of this faith back to the mid-1970s, a period when America was experimenting with everything: love, identity, consciousness. It was a time when the stars felt close, and new spiritual teachers promised to bridge heaven and earth. Applewhite and Nettles believed they were chosen, messengers from a higher dimension, sent to guide humanity through a transformation of the soul. Not to heaven in the traditional sense, but to a physical ascension, a departure from the human condition to join an advanced extraterrestrial civilization in the cosmos. Their partnership felt divine. He was the voice, she the interpreter. To their early followers, they weren't just teachers, they were the two, foretold in the book of Revelation. The prophecy of the two witnesses had found its reincarnation, and the faithful believed the world was witnessing a new biblical chapter unfold in real time. They began traveling across the American Southwest in a beat-up car, spreading their message in parks, churches, and college auditoriums. To strangers, they were eccentric. To seekers disillusioned by materialism, they were prophets. They promised liberation from the confines of the human body, a path to the next level of existence. To reach it, one had to shed all earthly attachments: money, possessions, family, identity. Their message was seductive in its simplicity. This world is a vessel. The true self is not human. Salvation lies among the stars. Soon, small groups gathered in quiet corners of cities like Oregon, Colorado, and California. The early followers described a kind of spiritual electricity, an awakening that felt transcendent, pure, and deeply personal. They left behind their homes and careers, renouncing everything familiar. Some said they felt a peace they'd never known before. Others described a lightness, a freedom from the weight of the world. But that freedom came at a cost. By the late 1970s, Heaven's Gate had solidified into a communal experiment, a wandering band of believers who lived by strict codes. No contact with family. No romantic relationships. No names from the old life. Each member adopted a new identity, gender-neutral, often ending with OD or TI. To outsiders, it seemed robotic, detached. But to the followers, it was symbolic. The human shell was being rewritten, purified for ascension. Investigators and sociologists who later studied the group would call it a complete reprogramming of self. Language, clothing, even thought patterns, all recalibrated toward one singular goal: transcendence. Marshall Applewhite became known simply as Do. Bonnie Nettles, T. Together, they formed the guiding pair, Do and T, the shepherds of souls preparing for departure. The faith grew quietly, spreading through whispers and flyers. No violence, no rebellion, just an internal withdrawal from Earth's illusions. The movement was remarkably disciplined. Members meditated, studied scripture, and watched the night sky with reverence. They believed the next-level spacecraft would soon arrive to take them home. For them, salvation wasn't abstract. It was tangible, mechanical, near. It had a shape, a light, and a destination. But every belief system is tested by loss. In 1985, Bonnie Nettles, T., passed away from cancer. For the first time, the prophecy faced contradiction. If ascension meant leaving Earth together, how could one leader die? For the faithful, this was not death. Applewhite reframed it. T had transcended her human vessel and returned to the next level. Her spirit, he said, was waiting for them beyond this plane. This reinterpretation became the cornerstone of their evolving theology. It shifted from a physical departure to a metaphysical transformation. The promise of the spacecraft persisted, but the message darkened. Without T, Applewhite grew more introspective, more authoritarian, and increasingly convinced that the human world was a trap. The culture of control. In their hidden communes, members of Heaven's Gate lived under a rhythm of obedience and ritual. Their days were structured, their thoughts monitored, their individuality slowly erased. They dressed alike, ate alike, and spoke in mirrored patterns, a deliberate uniformity meant to dissolve ego. The internet age was dawning, and for the first time, Applewhite found a tool to amplify his message. Through early websites and digital correspondence, Heaven's Gate reached new seekers online, one of the first cults to use the internet as a missionary tool. They spoke of cosmic gateways, of the human body as a container, of Earth as a place of recycling. The rhetoric was strange, poetic, hypnotic. It blurred the boundaries between science fiction and spirituality. But beneath the cosmic metaphors, the psychology was precise. Obedience was not demanded by force. It was nurtured through faith, community, and fear of being left behind. Through the late 1980s and into the 1990s, Heaven's Gate withdrew even further from society. They sold possessions, rented homes under pseudonyms, and began crafting videos. Applewhite staring directly into the camera, his eyes wide and unblinking, speaking of purity and the coming evacuation. He spoke softly, almost tenderly, as if consoling his audience. The next level is calling. The door will not remain open forever. These videos, later discovered by investigators, would become chilling artifacts of conviction, recordings of people utterly convinced they were preparing for the most sacred journey imaginable. They believed they were chosen to exit the earth, not through despair, but through enlightenment. Not as an ending, but as evolution. As the millennium neared, Heaven's Gate's internal culture hardened. Any doubt was a contamination. Members lived in shared houses, cutting off all external contact. They shaved their heads, wore matching clothes, and referred to themselves as crew members. They waited, patient, devoted, disciplined. The human world continued outside, unaware of the quiet countdown unfolding in suburban America. Every sighting of a comet or astronomical event reignited their anticipation. Each passing year reinforced their belief that something extraordinary was imminent. By the mid-1990s, Applewhite's teachings took on an apocalyptic tone. He spoke not of salvation through love, but of escape through departure, leaving behind a corrupted world for the purity of the stars. His followers believed him completely. To them, Earth had become the enemy, and Heaven's Gate, their only sanctuary. By now, the group was fully digitized, a rare fusion of ancient belief and modern technology. They created a website, one of the earliest religious portals online, offering cosmic philosophy alongside design services to support their living expenses. It was paradoxical, a cult promising escape from Earth, yet sustained by the tools of human progress. Sociologists would later describe Heaven's Gate as the first cyber cult, a precursor to how digital isolation can intensify collective belief. For followers, the web wasn't a window to the world. It was a mirror, reflecting only their own faith, magnified by shared certainty. In this moment, before the world knew their name, Heaven's Gate was a quiet storm, unseen, unchallenged, and utterly convinced. They believed they stood at the threshold of eternity. And as the 1990s drew toward its final years, a new light appeared in the sky, a comet that would change everything. To most, it was a wonder of nature. To them, it was the sign they had been waiting for. In the next part, The Digital Faith, How Heaven's Gate Sought the Stars, we explore how a message born of hope transformed into a coordinated exodus, and how the age of the internet immortalized one of the strangest, most haunting chapters in modern belief. The decade changed, but Heaven's Gate did not. While the world turned toward globalization and glowing computer screens, the group turned inward, tighter, quieter, more convinced than ever that they were the chosen crew of the next level. Inside modest rented houses scattered across California and Arizona, curtains stayed drawn. The members called them crafts, not homes, each one a training vessel preparing for departure. To outsiders they looked like computer hobbyists, disciplined, polite, and strangely private. To those inside, every keystroke, every whispered prayer, was a step closer to eternity. The internet was young, chaotic, full of promise. Where others saw opportunity for commerce and connection, Marshall Applewhite saw revelation. Under the group's web design business, Higher Source, the first pieces of digital doctrine took shape. The Heaven's Gate website became a beacon, a static page glowing in blue and white, its text declaring that the next level above human was open for enrollment. Visitors found an unusual mix of computer fonts, biblical verses, and cosmic vocabulary. It read like a message from another dimension. Earth is about to be recycled. Your only chance to survive is to leave with us. For curious early web users, it was puzzling. For seekers searching through online chat boards, it was electrifying. They had discovered a portal, a new religion perfectly adapted for the digital frontier. In the recordings that survive, Applewhite's tone feels hypnotic. His gaze, steady, luminous, locks onto the lens as though addressing every lonely soul through the glow of a computer monitor. He spoke of purity, of the contamination of earthly desire. He spoke of the heavenly crew waiting beyond the comet trails. And he warned that time was short. The message was neither angry nor despairing. It was delivered with calm certainty, the cadence of a teacher explaining a cosmic equation. To his followers, he was not a tyrant but a translator, decoding messages from higher intelligence. They saw themselves not as victims of control, but as participants in an experiment of spiritual evolution. Day after day, Heaven's Gate members lived like astronauts in training. They followed checklists, logged their behavior, maintained perfect order. Meals were timed, tasks rotated. They addressed each other without gender or hierarchy. Psychologists would later describe this as ritualized depersonalization, a way to dissolve individuality and reinforce collective identity. But to them, it was discipline. The shedding of human imperfections was essential preparation for ascension. They believed the human body was a vehicle, nothing more. And the earth? A classroom almost finished with its lesson. Then, in 1997, a new light appeared in the heavens. A comet, bright, unmissable, arced across the night sky. Astronomers named it Hale-Bopp. To the world it was a wonder. To Heaven's Gate, it was destiny. Within their secluded homes, Applewhite and his followers studied every photograph, every report. When a rumor spread online about an object following the comet, Applewhite seized upon it. This, he told them, is the sign, the craft that will take us home. In his worldview, the physical and the metaphysical had fused. The comet was both symbol and vessel, the promise that T.I.'s spirit had returned to lead them onward. In March of that year, Applewhite gathered his group for one last message. The tapes, later recovered by investigators, show serene faces, calm voices, and unwavering conviction. They smile. They thank the world for its lessons. They say they are not leaving in sorrow but in triumph. The language is peaceful, the tone deliberate. It is not about destruction but about transition, a transformation that only they could comprehend. To outside ears it sounds surreal, but inside that sealed belief system, it was consistent. Every sermon, every ritual had prepared them for this moment. When the authorities entered the mansion in Rancho Santa Fe, the world finally learned the name Heaven's Gate. The discovery made headlines across every continent. News anchors struggled for words. Reporters described the scene in whispers. Yet beyond the shock lay a deeper question. How could such calm conviction lead to such an end? Law enforcement and scholars pieced together the story from videos, journals, and digital archives. They found notebooks filled with celestial charts, task lists, farewell letters. Each entry was methodical, organized, eerily calm. There were no signs of struggle, only evidence of unwavering belief. Every member had chosen to follow Applewhite's teaching to what they believed was the next level above human. The FBI preserved the tapes. Psychologists began studying the group as a case study in modern belief. where spiritual longing met digital connectivity. For society, it was a revelation of another kind, the first tragedy of the internet age, a haunting intersection of technology and faith. Television programs replayed Applewhite's videos again and again, his words echoing through late-night broadcasts. "We're about to graduate from the human level." The repetition turned him into both a symbol and a warning. Documentaries, talk shows, and news specials tried to decode what had happened inside those quiet suburban walls. Was it brainwashing? Was it desperation? Or was it, as some followers truly believed, a sacred migration misunderstood by the world? Sociologists argued that Heaven's Gate represented a collision between the 20th century spiritual vacuum and the emerging internet culture, proof that isolation could now exist within connectivity. The cult had used the web not to open doors, but to build mirrors, reflections of its own conviction, multiplying in digital silence. Decades later, the Heaven's Gate website still flickers online, maintained by former members who survived by leaving earlier. It is simple, frozen in time, its fonts and colors unchanged since the 1990s. Visitors still arrive, curious, skeptical, fascinated. Some come searching for meaning, others for morbid history. But beneath the pixels lies a trace of something unmistakably human, the longing to belong to something greater than oneself. Experts today see Heaven's Gate as a study in psychological dependence and collective faith. It teaches that devotion, unchecked by critical thought, can spiral into isolation. That technology, when used as an echo chamber, can amplify conviction until no outside voice remains. Yet the story also reveals a deeper truth. Human beings are dreamers. We look to the skies not only for science, but for salvation. In Heaven's Gate, that yearning turned inward, transformed into a belief that heaven was not metaphor but destination. More than 25 years later, the phrase Heaven's Gate has become shorthand for both mystery and warning. Podcasts, documentaries, and research papers revisit it to understand how charisma and community can merge into something unstoppable. For some, it remains a cautionary tale about blind faith. For others, it is a window into the extremes of spiritual imagination. Either way, its echoes continue, online, in memory, and in the eternal question that humanity keeps asking. What lies beyond? Narrator's voice softens. They were not monsters. They were believers, human, flawed, and yearning. They sought light in an age of static, meaning in a time of noise. And somewhere between faith and fear, they built a ladder of words that reached toward the stars. The ladder broke, but the longing remains, an ancient ache to leave the dust behind and touch the infinite. That is the story of Heaven's Gate. A digital prayer, whispered to the cosmos, still drifting, somewhere out there, among the comets.